The date is June 8th, 2026. The place is a convention center in Santa Clara, California. But the real stage is a screen showing a single, deceptively simple slide, .A roadmap. And on that roadmap, a target. A 14-high-volume manufacturing 2029. To the general public, this is a footnote. To the semiconductor industry, it is a declaration. It is a promise from the most powerful company you have never heard of. A company that does not sell a single product with its own name on it, yet whose technology powers almost EV. Every device you touch. This is TSMC. And this announcement is not just about a chip. It is about the future of physics, the limits of money, and the precarious balance of global power. But let's be very clear about what was actually said. TSMC's CEO, C.C. Wei, took the stage at the company's annual Technology Symposium. He did not unveil a product. He unveiled a process. The A14 node, which is a 2-nanometer class technology, will deliver a 15% speed improvement or a 30% power reduction over the current N2 node. That sounds like progress. It sounds like the relentless march of Moore's Law, but the numbers hide a deeper, more uncomfortable truth. Let's go back to the timeline. In 2022, TSMC started volume production of its 3-nanometer node, the N3, for Apple's A17 chip. That was a huge leap. Then, in 2025, they began risk production of the N2 node, the first to use a new transistor architecture called Gate-All-Around, or GAA. This was a fundamental change in how a transistor is built. Now, in 2026, they're announcing the A14, which they call a 2-nanometer class node, but which is actually a refinement of that same GAA architecture. Here's the first crack in the story. The A14 is not a full node jump. It is a half-step. TSMC's own press release stated that the A14 will have 1.15 times the logic density of N2. In the old days, a new node meant roughly doubling the transistor density. That number, 1.15, is a whisper of a different reality. The exponential curve is flattening. The physics of silicon is pushing back. So why announce a chip that is 3 years away? Why hold a symposium to tell the world about a process that won't be in a phone until 2030? The answer is not engineering. The answer is psychology. The semiconductor industry is a theater of dominance. Every announcement is a signal to investors, a warning to competitors, and a reassurance to customers. TSMC is not just building chips, it is building a narrative of inevitability. This is where the main character becomes interesting. TSMC was founded in 1987 by Morris Chang. His vision was radical, a pure-play foundry, a company that would never design its own chips, but would manufacture them for everyone else. At the time, it seemed like a terrible business. The margins were thin, the technology was hard, and the customers were skeptical. But Chang understood something that his rivals did not. By not competing with his customers, he became indispensable. Apple, NVIDIA, AMD, Qualcomm. They all trust TSMC because TSMC has no incentive to steal their designs. That trust created a monopoly. Today, TSMC controls over 90% of the market for the most advanced chips, the ones below 7 nanometers. No other company comes close. Samsung has its own foundry, but its yields on advanced nodes have been poor. Intel, once the king of manufacturing, has lost its lead. The result is a single point of failure for the entire global technology supply chain. And that failure point is located on an island that China considers a renegade province. This geopolitical tension is the hidden engine of the A14 announcement. When C.C. Wei said, "A 14 is not just a shrink, it's a new architecture for power efficiency." He was also saying, "We are still the only game in town." Every major tech company knows that if Taiwan were to become unstable, the global economy would freeze. The A14 roadmap is a promise of continuity. It is TSMC saying we are still investing, still innovating, still in control. But the skeptics are loud, and they have evidence. Industry analysts at IC Insights note that the 2029 target is 2 years later than originally projected for a 2-nanometer class node. The gap between announcements and actual production is widening. This is not a secret. TSMC's own roadmap shows that the time between nodes is increasing. The physics of silicon is not just slowing down, it is becoming exponentially more expensive. A single advanced fab now costs over $20 billion. The tools, made by companies like ASML, are so complex that they require their own supply chains. The extreme ultraviolet lithography machines are the size of a bus and cost hundreds of millions of dollars each. So when TSMC says A14 will use next-generation nanosheet transistors with improved channel strain engineering, what they are really saying is, we are spending billions to squeeze a few more % of performance out of a material that is reaching its theoretical limit. The optimists, like analysts at Bernstein, believe TSMC will meet the target. They point to TSMC's track record. They have never missed a major node transition. But the bearish analysts at Arete Research argue that the name A14 is marketing hype. They say it is a rebranding of incremental improvements to mask the fact that the industry is running out of road. Let's go deeper into that naming controversy. It is a historical pattern. The node names 7 nanometers, 5 nanometers, 3 nanometers, 2 nanometers no longer correspond to any physical dimension of the transistor. In the 1990s, a 180 nanometer node actually had gates that were 180 nanometers long. Today, a 3 nanometers chip has features that are physically larger than 3 nanometers. The name has become a marketing label. Intel's disastrous 10 nanometers delays and TSMC's aggressive naming created a confusing landscape where a 7 nanometers process from one company might not be the same as a 7 nanometers from another. The A14 name continues this trend. It is a signal of progress, not a measurement of it. But let us not dismiss the technical achievement entirely. The A14 represents real engineering. The use of nanosheet transistors is a genuine innovation. It allows better control of current leakage and power consumption. For applications like AI inference at the edge, where a chip needs to run on a tiny battery, that 30% power reduction is a huge deal. For data centers, the 15% speed improvement translates to faster training times for large language models. The A14 will power the next generation of iPhones, the next generation of NVIDIA GPUs, and the next generation of autonomous driving systems. However, the real question is not whether TSMC can build it, it is whether the world can afford to wait, and whether the world can afford the risk. This brings us to the competition. Samsung, in 2025, announced its own 2-nanometer class node, the SF2Z, claiming production in 2027. That is 2 years before TSMC's A14. But Samsung has a problem. It has struggled with yield on its advanced nodes. Yield is the percentage of chips on a wafer that actually work. If your yield is low, the cost per chip skyrockets. Samsung has not demonstrated working chips at scale on its 3 nanometers node. Intel, meanwhile, is pushing its 18A node, which it claims will leapfrog TSMC by 2027. But Intel has lost its manufacturing lead before. Its 10 nanometers node was delayed by years. The company is now betting its future on a turnaround that has not yet materialized. So TSMC's 2029 announcement is partly a response to these claims. It is a "will still be ahead" message. But it is also a bet on the status quo. TSMC is saying, you can try to catch up, but we are already moving to the next thing. This is the classic strategy of a dominant player. They set the pace. They force everyone else to react. But there is another layer to this story, one that goes beyond chips and roadmaps. It is the question of alternative computing architectures. The relentless pursuit of smaller silicon nodes has consumed billions of dollars. But what if that is the wrong path? What if the future is not smaller transistors but different kinds of computing? Consider quantum computing. It uses qubits that can exist in multiple states simultaneously. It promises to solve problems that are impossible for classical computers. But quantum computers are not replacements for your phone's processor. They are specialized machines for specific tasks. Neuromorphic computing mimics the structure of the human brain. It is incredibly energy efficient for pattern recognition. Photonic computing uses light instead of electricity. It could be orders of magnitude faster for certain operations. These alternatives are not science fiction. They are being researched by companies like IBM, Google, and Intel. But they are not ready. The silicon transistor is still the most efficient, most scalable, most reliable computing device ever invented. The question is whether that will remain true in 2035. TSMC's A 14 roadmap assumes that it will. It assumes that silicon has another decade of life. But the skeptics argue that we are hitting fundamental physical limits. Quantum tunneling, where electrons leak through barriers that should be impenetrable. Power density, where a chip generates so much heat that it cannot be cooled. And lithography resolution, where the wavelength of light used to etch circuits cannot get any smaller. This is the engineering reality. The A14 will be built using the same extreme ultraviolet lithography as the N2. The improvements will come from better materials, better design, and better process control. But the laws of physics are not negotiable. At some point, you cannot make a transistor smaller. And when that happens, the industry will face a crisis. Let us now take a branch. Let us look at the human side of this story. Morris Chang, the founder, is now in his 90s. He built TSMC from nothing. But the company he created is now a geopolitical target. The United States, through the CHIPS Act, is spending $52 billion to bring advanced manufacturing back to American soil. But the reality is sobering. A TSMC fab in Arizona is already behind schedule. The company has struggled to find skilled workers and to navigate local regulations. The most advanced chips, the ones that matter for AI and defense, will still be made in Taiwan for at least another decade. This creates a paradox. The most critical technology in the world comes from the most contested place. China has made no secret of its desire to reunify Taiwan, by force if necessary. TSMC's fabs in Hsinchu are within range of Chinese missiles. The company's 2029 roadmap is not just a technical plan. It is a bet on the stability of the island. If that bet fails, the entire global supply chain for advanced chips collapses. This is why the A14 announcement matters. It is a signal of confidence. It is TSMC saying, "We are investing for the long term. We believe in the future." But it is also a reminder of fragility. The world's most powerful company, in terms of leverage over the global economy, is a single point of failure. Let us return to the symposium. C.C. Wei is on stage. He is confident. He shows slides of transistor density, power efficiency, and performance gains. The audience of engineers and analysts applaud, but the applause is polite, not ecstatic. Everyone in the room knows the truth. The easy gains are gone. Every new node is a battle. The A14 is a victory, but it is a victory measured in single-digit percentages, not orders of magnitude. The story of TSMC's next-generation chip is not a story of triumph. It is a story of survival. It is about a company that has mastered the art of the possible, but is now running into the wall of the impossible. It is about an industry that has built the foundation of the modern world, but is now facing the limits of that foundation. So what happens if TSMC's 2029 target slips? Who wins and who loses? If the A14 is delayed, Apple's next iPhone will be less powerful. NVIDIA's next AI chip will be less efficient. The entire cycle of innovation, which has been driven by Moore's law for 50 years, will slow down. The optimists will say it is a temporary setback. The skeptics will say it is the beginning of the end. But there is another possibility. Perhaps the A14 will be built on time. Perhaps TSMC will squeeze another generation of performance out of silicon. And perhaps that will be enough to carry us through the next decade until a new computing paradigm emerges. The problem is that we do not know when that paradigm will arrive. Quantum computing is still in the lab. Neuromorphic chips are niche. Photonic computing is experimental. The A14 is the last great hope of the Silicon Age. It is the final chapter of a story that began with the invention of the transistor in 1947. And like all final chapters, it is filled with tension, uncertainty, and the weight of history. The announcement on June 8, 2026, was not a celebration. It was a declaration. A declaration that TSMC will not give up, that it will fight the laws of physics, the limits of money, and the threats of geopolitics to deliver one more generation of progress. And that is the story, not of a chip, but of a company that has become the linchpin of the modern world. A company that holds the future of AI, of smartphones, of autonomous vehicles, and of national security in its hands. The A14 is a promise. Whether it can be kept is a question that will define the next decade. The slide on the screen in Santa Clara said 2029, but the real timeline is unknown. The only certainty is that the race is not over. It is only getting harder.